Welcome to today's webinar for the Include project. Let's talk about clinical trials. My name is Erica Tarver, and we are excited to have you join us today. Just a few housekeeping rules before I turn it over to Dr. Lori Ryan. If you have any questions or would like have any questions for any of the speakers, we ask that you please submit them through the Q&A or through the chat function. Without further ado, I will turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Lori Ryan.
Thank you, Erica. I'm Dr. Lori Ryan. I'm with the National Institute on Aging and the Include project. And it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Lauren Tomey. Dr. Tomey is an associate professor for the Department of Internal Medicine at the University of Kansas Medical Center. She is a registered dietitian with expertise in weight management, physical activity, and individuals with intellectual disabilities, including Down syndrome. Dr. Tomey's research focus is the promotion of weight management and physical activity in individuals with intellectual disabilities, as well as the prevention of Alzheimer's disease in adults with Down syndrome. Dr. Tomey has received 5 NIH grants, and she's published over 65 peer-reviewed articles. Welcome, Dr. Tomey.
Thank you. The big thing we're going to be talking about today is clinical trials, what they are, why you may or may not want to do them, and hopefully answer any of those questions that you might have about enrolling yourself or a loved one with Down syndrome. So starting off, we're going to kind of talk about what is clinical research first. So we're really going to get into clinical trials, but there's an umbrella term over everything else called clinical research. That includes both observational studies and clinical trials. So when someone says research, there's a whole lot of different things that can be talking about. So it can be talking about clinical research, which is any kind of research that involves people. You might also sometimes hear people talk about basic research or basic science, which is typically things that involve animals or cells or other things that aren't people. Within that clinical research umbrella, we have observational studies. So this includes epidemiological studies, which improves the understanding of patterns, causes, and effects of disease, health and disease. We also have, you can do a cross-sectional study where you might come in and just have someone look at you at one point in time, maybe look at your health, look at different outcomes, and then they kind of use that to be able to help identify how common a health condition might be and factors associated with it. As well as that, you can also do a longitudinal cohort study, which a lot of times you'll come in multiple times, but someone will just kind of look and see where you are that time. And it can also help to determine like when you develop a disease and what might be related to that. On this other side, we have clinical trials. And so that's where we're really going to spend most of our time talking today. So clinical trials are really the heart of medical advances. And what they are looking at new ways to prevent, detect, or treat diseases. A clinical trial is when you come in and you're assigned to do something. So you have to change something. And we look at how that change affects your health over time. So a lot of times when we think about clinical trials, we think about drug trials. So people who maybe try a new drug to see if it can help prevent a disease, or even recently with all the vaccine trials where vaccines were tested to see if they work. Clinical trials are not always drug trials, though. For example, a lot of the research I do, a clinical trial looks more like this, where it's an exercise trial where we just see how can we get people to exercise, or how can we get people to help change their health behaviors to make a difference. So clinical trials examine a lot of different things. So of course, they examine new drugs or combinations of drugs for different uses, but you can also look at maybe new ways of doing surgery, a use of a new medical device, new ways to change your behavior to improve health. So this would be like physical activity or changing your diet or even trying to do things to help you sleep better. And then you can look at new ways to improve the quality of life for people with acute or chronic illness. So, what can make a difference that maybe isn't just using a drug, but doing some other things. There's really a wide spectrum of clinical trials. I think the other big question is, why would someone want to do a clinical trial? Why would you want to devote your time and energy and try these things? Well, there's a lot of really good reasons. So one, you can be someone who helps contribute to moving the science forward, which might help yourself, but also help others. There's also the possibility of receiving the newest treatment. So a lot of times, especially with the drug trials, you'll be able to get state-of-the-art drugs or different things before they're available to the general population. There's also the chance you'll be able to improve your own health by doing a clinical trial. But really, one of the most important reasons are that clinical trials are one of the only ways to help researchers find treatments for you and for others. So typically what happens is after a clinical trial, when we find these good things that happen in research, we take those and put them into practice. So that's sometimes how doctors get their recommendations on how to help you treat a disease you might have or a different condition. It's how we know there's new drugs we can use that are safe and effective for treating diseases. And it's really how we learn to bet what helps make people healthiest. So then, why should you or your loved one with Down syndrome join research? This is actually really important because traditionally, individuals with Down syndrome have been excluded from research. So when doing a research study, there's something called an inclusion and exclusion criteria. And this is the things that you must have to be able to enroll in the study, or if you have something, you can't be in the study. And traditionally, Down syndrome has been an exclusion criteria, which means we don't know if something that works in the general population will work in individuals with Down syndrome or be as safe. A lot of times studies haven't even focused on Down syndrome specific issues like regression or aging or Alzheimer's. And so enrolling in research studies allows researchers and doctors to provide better healthcare for individuals with Down syndrome and can help prevent or treat conditions related to Down syndrome. And this is really important so we can continue to improve the quality of life and making sure people live longer. So how does the clinical trial process work? I bet sometimes you've heard people rambling off things about like a phase 3 clinical trial or phase 2, especially, in the last couple of years where they've been doing some of these large vaccine trials. But the clinical process is a little different for drug studies versus behavioral studies. So we'll kind of go through those. So in clinical trials, this is kind of more the drug trials or surgical trials. You do some preclinical research, which is typically done in like cell models or animal models. And then once you kind of have an idea and you want to see if it's approved for going ahead and testing in humans, you do a phase 1 clinical trial. And this is a really small trial in about 20 to 80 people where you really just give them the drug for the first time and really learn, is it safe? Are there any horrible side effects? Once that is shown to be pretty safe, you go to a phase 2 trial where those are going to be between 100 and 300 people. And that's now, sometimes they're done a little bit longer and you actually start to look, okay, does this drug work and do what it's supposed to do? Also, you continue to test, is it safe? Are there any long-term side effects? Once we've really seen that, okay, this seems to do what it's supposed to do, it seems to be pretty safe, we move to a phase 3 clinical trial. And these are some of the big ones a lot of times we hear about in the news or in other things. And so these are about 1,000 to 3,000 participants. A lot of times these are done nationally at multiple sites all over the US. And this is really when the drug is given to a lot of people to really confirm it does work, to do what it's supposed to do. We really monitor side effects. And then we compare to make sure it's better than maybe the standard treatment or whatever other drugs could have been out there at the time. After the results of that go through, a drug goes to FDA review, where they go through all the results of that study and confirm its safety and effectiveness. And then typically it either gets approved or not approved. And then once approved, it's kind of in this stage 4, where we're continuously watching it, monitoring the safety, looking at how it's working, what are the benefits, what are side effects. And a lot of times in these phase 4 trials, we'll see maybe this drug that was prescribed for one thing. So maybe it was a drug that was prescribed to help seizure control. We start to see the side effect that it's actually maybe helping people sleep better or do some other things. And so we'll go back and start a new trial saying, okay, does this drug actually work for that condition as well? And it kind of starts the cycle over. Now, behavioral research is a little different. So typically you start with some basic research, and I'm going to kind of talk about my own experience since I'm a behavioral researcher. So we're going to talk about like physical activity. So for example, basic research has shown that physical activity is good. And we need to find ways to help people get more physical activity in. And so we want to develop a physical activity intervention that people will follow, increase their physical activity, and we can see, does it do all these good things? So we might do some stage 1 research first, which is we really start to develop this intervention. So this could be talking to individuals to see, what their barriers and supports to physical activity are. It might be looking at interventions that already exist and modifying them. For example, maybe taking something that exists in the general population and adapting or refining it really specific for the Down syndrome population, and kind of creating a general template. From there, you do stage 2 research, which you want to test, does this work? Does this kind of do what we want it to do in a very controlled setting? So these are a lot of times done at academic medical centers where they're closely monitored. A lot of times research staff will lead the intervention. You'll come in for lab-based testing within the medical center, and it's tightly controlled. Once we see, okay, that seems to work and it seems to be producing some of the results we want, we can move to a stage 3 program, which is done in community centers or in community things. So let's say we started developing this physical activity intervention we were really excited about. We've shown that, if we deliver it like in our research lab, it seems to work to get people to promote activities. Now we're going to send it out. Maybe we're going to have Special Olympics deliver this program. And we're going to see, okay, in a small amount of people who are testing this, does it seem to work? Great. And we see, yeah, it does. They're actually getting more activity in. So you move to a stage 4, which is effectiveness. And that's where we're really going to now compare this against the standard of treatment. So maybe Special Olympics had already been doing one program, and now there's this new one that we think might be better. So they'll maybe create a randomized trial where people are randomized to either do one program, the old program or the new one, and we see, does this work better? From there, we really move into implementation dissemination. And so this is where we make that physical activity intervention or whatever kind of behavioral intervention it is, really kind of standard of care. So we really work to incorporate it into different community agencies or hospitals across kind of the nation, incorporating it into policy and really getting it out there for as many people as possible. One of the really good examples is that anyone's heard of the diabetes prevention program. So this was original study looking to see, can we prevent type 2 diabetes? And now it's kind of a policy, and there's people across the nation everywhere that can get approved to deliver this and making it really accessible. So one thing you might be asking are clinical trials safe? And the answer is yes and no, but for the most part, yes. So there are many ethical guidelines and procedures in place to protect individuals in research studies. So almost all clinical trials are approved and monitored by something called an institutional review board. And the purpose of this institutional review board, or sometimes they're called IRBs, are really made to ensure that the risk of the study are minimal compared with the benefits. So a lot of times it's a benefit risk ratio. If we see something that has a lot of risk and very little benefits, it's probably not going to get approved, not probably going to take place. This board is made up of doctors, scientists, statisticians, and even members of the community who give their input into looking, does this seem something safe and that it's okay to have people do. These IRBs also give extra protection when research includes individuals with Down syndrome. This is really done to make sure they're not being taken advantage of and that their health and their safety is put very high. So the other thing to know, researchers are required to tell you all of the risk of a study before you enroll. They'll also tell you how they're going to try to protect you from any of those risks. And then they have to keep you updated if any of those risks ever change. So you'll know going in kind of what your risks are, how safe it might be, and then you can make that decision yourself if that's something you're willing to do. So do the risk or do the benefits outweigh the risk? Now going into this, I'm going to kind of walk through what the research process looks like. And some of this stuff we might not understand right now, but I have slides to kind of go through and clarify each of these points. But let's say, you hear me talking today and you're like, okay, maybe research sounds like something I want to do. And you'll go out and find a research study you or your loved one might qualify for. And we'll go over how to do that in a little bit. And you contact the study team and you tell them they're interested. Traditionally, they'll come back and ask you some questions or have you fill out a form just to make sure you meet that inclusion and exclusion criteria. So that criteria that says, yes, you can be in the study, and making sure you don't need anything that says you can't be in the study. Then they'll also tell you maybe more about the study, what it entails, and start going over some of those risks and benefits. If you decide, okay, this is something you're interested for and qualify for, you move forward, and a lot of times then you're going to review something called a consent form. You'll sign that consent form and you kind of enroll, at least initially, in the screening. Right after that, a lot of studies have something called a pre-screening assessment. So they go through and maybe do some confirmatory assessments where you'll come in, or they'll do some other things where they'll collect data just to make sure, again, that you meet that inclusion and exclusion criteria. Or you sometimes just go in and you go straight for a baseline testing. So baseline testing means that original time. We're going to see where your health is and where all these outcomes that they might be interested are before starting any kind of intervention. After that, you're normally randomized, which we'll go over in a little bit what that is, to 2 or more conditions. So this is kind of a figure down here. So you have this randomization where you're placed in a group. So you might be placed to get this treatment group that's maybe testing out the new treatment or new drug or new intervention that we want to look at. And then the control group, which is traditionally kind of the standard of care, or it could be like a placebo drug. So let's go into detail about these things. So informed consent form, what is that? So an informed consent is the process of providing you with key information about a research study before you decide whether or not to take part in it. So this is normally in a written document that will be handed to you by the study team, or kind of now in the post-COVID age, a lot of times this might be online, like a DocuSign or something else where you can do it remotely. And the research team will go over and read with you this informed consent document. And they'll go into detail about the purpose of the study, how long the study is expected to last, what all is going to be asked for you to do, and how long each of those things will ask. They'll give you information on who you can contact for further information. And then they'll go over the risk and benefits of the study and how you're going to be protected. You then have the ability to decide whether or not to sign the document and enroll in the study. Sometimes you can take a couple days to decide, or as long as you need to decide. You don't have to always do it on the spot. So if you want to sit back and think about it and look at that, that's okay. But one of the most important things to know is taking part in a clinical trial is completely voluntary, and you can leave the study at any time. So maybe at first you think this sounds great, and then once you get into it, you realize, hey, you don't want to be doing this anymore. It's okay to leave, and there's never any repercussions from leaving a study. So with that, someone might ask, is someone with Down syndrome allowed to sign an informed consent and enroll in research on their own? And the answer is, it depends. Anyone under the age of 18 or who is not their own legal guardian must have their legal guardian or authorized legal representative sign the informed consent form on their behalf. However, this individual will then sign something called an assent form, which is normally kind of a smaller version of the consent form that they'll sign. When doing this, you have to have both a consent and an assent form done to enroll in the research project. And this is kind of nice. So it protects the person, for example, with Down syndrome from being forced to enroll in something they really didn't want to, or that they didn't understand. So you can't have, for example, let's say a parent really wants their child to be in this program or this study, but that person doesn't want to do it. If they don't sign the assent form, but the parent signs the consent form, it still won't work. They still can't enroll. And vice versa. Maybe that person really wants to be in a study and their parent or legal guardian doesn't think it's a good idea. Then again, they won't be able to do it. So it kind of takes both individuals to sign these forms to agree to be in research, and just provides additional protections. So we've talked a little bit about randomization, and that's when you're put in one of these groups. And a lot of people wonder, do you get to pick your group? And the answer is no. Individuals are always randomized to a group by chance and not by choice. And typically a computer is the one assigning you to a group, so you really can't like try to convince someone to put you in one group or the other. Your odds of being in one group versus the other are typically a 50-50 chance, like flipping a coin. Some studies are a little different, where maybe they're enrolling more people in like the treatment arm versus the control arm. Sometimes you have more than 2 groups, and so that's more going to be like rolling a dice. Even depending on the research study, you might even not know what group you're in. So this is called a blinded trial. This we see a lot with drug trials. And sometimes the people conducting the study won't know either. And so that's called double blinded, where neither of you know what group you're in. We see this, like I said, a lot more in like the drug trials or surgical trials. For some of the behavioral interventions, it's really hard to not know what group you're doing if you're going to be asked to do something. So I talked a little bit about placebo or this control group. What is that? So most clinical trials will compare a new product or therapy with one that already exists, or maybe one that doesn't exist. And so in some studies, you might be assigned to receive the control group. So this control group might get the current treatment or whatever we're normally using, the standard of care, while the other group gets the new treatment. And that way you can look and see, is this new treatment really better, or even, depending on what the research question is, better or non-inferior, or get similar results as the old one. Other times you might be in the drug studies where you get a placebo. So a placebo would be an inactive drug. So we think about these as like sugar pills, where you don't know. It looks exactly like the other pill. So you might not know, are you getting that one? Are you getting the other one? If you are in a control group, some studies might offer you the treatment group at the end of the study, but that's not always the case. And a lot of times being in the control group still has benefits. So it shouldn't be something you're worried or scared about. Will researchers share your data with anyone? The law requires that researchers keep all your identity, and anything that could identify you as confidential. So traditionally, as soon as you start a research study, you'll be assigned a study ID, and all the data collected will only be associated with that study ID. Only a select few people on the research team will know whose name is associated with each ID. So maybe as soon as you enroll, you stop becoming, Lauren, and I start becoming study ID 10045. And everything about me, everyone's just going to know it's 10045. And so your name just kind of gets lost. And that way, no one will know you're in the study and no one will know this protected information about you. The researchers typically will publish the results of the study. However, again, a lot of times they only discuss group results, and your name will never be used in a publication or presentation about the clinical trial unless some people will every now and then give access or allowing that, especially if it's just like a picture that someone wants to use or a little video clip. But that's a different type of permission that's taken. Traditionally, nothing is ever used. Same thing, that the data collected might be shared in these public repositories for other researchers to use for research. And again, your name and identifiable information will never be included. What happens after a clinical trial is over? Well, after the clinical trial is completed, researchers will look at the information collected and make decisions about the meanings of those findings and kind of what the next steps in future testing might be. The results are often published in peer-reviewed scientific journals. And a lot of times the results will also be published on something called clinicaltrials.gov. And so clinicaltrials.gov is a repository where anytime before you start an intervention, you have to kind of enroll your study and put in all the details about it. This will be really good for helping to look for research studies because you can see anything that's currently recruiting or is about to recruit, what conditions they work with, and what the intervention is. And then after the trial's done, researchers are required to put the results up. So this is actually a little screenshot of some of my own studies, but you can see right here, this is completed, and underneath it says has results. So that means if anyone who wanted to be in the study, or even anyone who was just curious about the data and didn't want to go looking for the paper, could just hit the results tab, and then it will pull up the results of that study. Now, as someone in a trial, you may or may not find out what group you were in, or even what your individual results are. This is really dependent on the trial that you're enrolled in and kind of what their rules are. Now, if there's ever any reason that it's like critically medically necessary to know what group you were in, the researchers will typically release that information. So you might be asking, okay, what should I be considering before joining a clinical trial? Well, there's a bunch of things to really think about. So one, what are the risks of the study and what are the benefits? How can it help you and how can it help others? And is that better than any of the risks the study might have? You also have to be okay with being in either or any of the study groups. If there's one you are really worried about being in or don't think it would work out, it's probably not a good study for you. You also have to look at the time commitment of the study. A lot of studies run on protocols where it's really important for them to collect certain data at certain times. So if they know you're going to have to come in every 6 months and these are the times and it's going to take you 2 hours, you have to be willing that you can make that happen. Or if they're asking you to change something or do something, you have to, again, look at your life and your calendar and say, can I fit that in? You also have to look at those study requirements, like driving to a hospital or other academic medical center every month if that's required, or even changing part of your lifestyle or being willing to take a new drug. So there's a lot of considerations before joining a trial. One of the other big considerations is the role of the parent or caregiver, especially in Down syndrome research. Caregivers are often needed to assist with any kind of transportation needs. They schedule appointments. They assist with intervention compliance. A lot of times they have to assist with completing questionnaires or surveys, or will have any specific questionnaire surveys or testing done just on themselves. Oftentimes, the parent or caregiver is just as important to the research process as the participants themselves. So parents and caregivers really need to look at that list of what to include and decide not only does my loved one with Down syndrome have the ability to commit to this, but also do I. So what's being done to increase research in Down syndrome? I think you maybe heard me say earlier that there's not a lot of being done or not a lot of research has included individuals with Down syndrome. But the National Institute of Health has a new program or project called the INCLUDE Project, or the investigation of co-occurring conditions across the lifespan to understand Down syndrome, that was made to really devote a lot of time and effort to funding critical research in the Down syndrome population. So some of the goals of the INCLUDE project are conduct clinical trials that include individuals with Down syndrome, and they're doing trials that are specific to Down syndrome related risks, such as like regression, and sleep apnea, but also making sure that individuals with Down syndrome are just included in general research studies. They're also working to bring new researchers into the Down syndrome field to really create more state-of-the-art modern research and keep all the research it's kind of at like the cutting edge, make sure it's including individuals with Down syndrome. So if any of this sounds appealing to you and you're wondering, well, how do I go about finding if there's research studies that myself or my loved one can enroll in, one of the best places to go is a website called DS Connect, which is right here. It's dsconnect.nih.gov. And it's a Down syndrome registry. So first you can enroll and just provide basic information about the person with Down syndrome in it. And that actually is a research study in its own. So it's a health survey where it's going to be more of that observational that we talked about earlier, but really kind of allowing people to collect data about health risk, about different things, and it's going to help, again, expand the research field. But then participants can also learn about clinical trials through this site. So in almost any of these studies funded by the INCLUDE project are going to be listed on DS Connect. Additionally, you can go to this clinicaltrials.gov that I talked about earlier, which has any clinical trial going on, has to be registered on there. But when you go on, there'll be a search box and it will say, like, type in a medical condition you're interested in. So you can type in Down syndrome or intellectual disability or sleep apnea or whatever it is that maybe you're most passionate about. And every study that is recruiting or maybe getting ready to recruit will come up there. And so you can kind of go through and click them and see if you meet the inclusion/exclusion criteria. So again, there's some research just for all individuals with different intellectual disabilities or all individuals with sleep apnea or whatever medical condition you might be looking. So they might not be just Down syndrome specific, but someone with Down syndrome might still qualify. So the last thing is, we wanted to kind of talk about someone who had been involved in clinical research and their experiences. So I kind of wanted to go over the study that they're in. To give a little overview. So this is one of my ongoing studies. We call it the Promotion of Physical Activity for the Prevention of Alzheimer's Disease in Adults with Down Syndrome. In this study, we're looking to see if these group remote physical activity sessions can improve physical activity. And then looking to see if physical activity has any effect on cognition or imaging or anything related to Alzheimer's disease. So when someone's interested in the study, they're randomized or they're put into 1 of 3 groups. A remote high group, which gets these 3 group exercise sessions a week. The remote low group, which gets 1 group exercise session per week, or enhanced usual control, where they don't get any of the live exercise sessions, but they do meet with a health coach twice a month, and then they get a Fitbit, and they're just kind of told to get physical activity in on its own. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Erica.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tomei, and that was a wonderful presentation, I think, overview. Now, and again, if there's any questions that any of our participants may have, please feel free to submit them in the chat and Q&A. Now we're going to open it up for a general discussion, and I'm happy and pleased to introduce our study participants that Dr. Tomei mentioned. So first we have Sean Robert Cortan. Sean is 22 years old, and he's a young adult with Down syndrome, and he participates in Dr. Tomei's study. He is the middle of three sons and is very active. He's played challenger baseball, played soccer, swam for the Special Olympics, ran track, participated in weightlifting, participated in unified bowling, and learned to ride a bicycle. When we say Sean is very active, Sean is very active. After graduating from the Elkhorn Young Adult Program in May of 2022, Sean landed a job as a coffee shop attendant at a local assisted living facility. His primary duties include stocking the coffee shop, as well as cleaning the shop and surrounding areas. While he takes great pride in his work and strives to please his manager, his job fulfills Sean's desire to be around and build a relationship with others. Outside of his work, Sean loves to sing, dance, play drums, swim, and hang out with his family. And we're also pleased to have with Sean his mother, Lisa Cortan. Lisa grew up in a small town in South Dakota and is the oldest of four children. After high school, she attended Mount Marty College in Yankton, South Dakota, where she graduated with a degree in secondary education. When their first child, Devin, was born, they decided Lisa would stay home and be a full-time mom, a full-time job. Sean was born 2 years later, and Carson, their third son, was born 7 years after that. Lisa is Sean's frontline caregiver, his advocate, his teacher, his coach, his friend, and her most loved role is his mother. So we'll start off by asking a few questions of Lisa and Sean. And first of all, we just want to say welcome and thank you again for being here. So Lisa, could you tell us how you learned about Dr. Tomey's study and why you decided to participate in the study?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Well, actually, we were driving home from Kansas City. We live in Omaha, and I was checking my emails, and I received an email from a friend here in Omaha who I believe her son actually was in the study the year before Sean. And so I read about the study, and they needed, I think, maybe 6 more people to join the study. So it was kind of a last minute, last minute plea for, can anybody else join? We're trying to get this done. So I read about it, and just kind of seemed like a win-win situation. It was going to be research that could benefit Sean possibly later in his life, and he was going to get healthier, throughout the process. So I thought, why not? So we took a chance and signed up, and here we are.
That's awesome. Well, and as we learned from Dr. Tomey's presentation, assent is part of it. So Sean, clearly you assented to participate in the study. So can you tell us, what is it that you like about participating in the study so far?
I am very stronger and healthy. I get more abs. I want to play on my swing with my brothers and mother, fathers, my uncles, my cousins.
Okay, so I know you were reading what you wrote down, but she's asking, what do you like about being in doing the exercise study with trainer Jesse? What do you like about it? What does it do for you?
I'm very, very smart.
Yeah, it makes you smart and
more stronger.
It makes you stronger. Yes.
That's awesome. And you mentioned your family members that help you and that you're participating with and support you as well. Do you have like a little healthy competition going on with your siblings, with your brothers, as to who can do more push-ups? I'm just curious. This has nothing to do with
What do you do? Do you do any exercises with your brothers?
I play arm wrestling with them.
You like to do arm wrestling with them?
Yeah.
And then is there anything that you do in the basement with your brothers for exercise?
They also play drums with me.
Drums and also
Dance too.
And they do a lot of dancing with the Nintendo Switch.
It's a great form of exercise and one I think is underappreciated. So a question then for you, Lisa, is as the study is ongoing, Have there been any benefits that you've noticed about participating in the study, both for Sean and for you as well?
Sure. I think, well, wearing the Fitbit, the steps show up right away. And you guys just talking with us, you've heard about Sean's crazy step numbers that he's getting. So I think one of the benefits is just the awareness of the exercise or the amount of exercise he's getting. So, it's a constant of him telling us and letting us know the exercise that he's getting. I think, there's a lot of things. So, I think we call him trainer or boy Jesse because we have other Jessies in the realm of the study. So just talking with Jesse, we've gotten some protein powder, that Sean's doing each day, which has led to our adult son that doesn't live with us doing the same protein powder, and my husband doing the protein powder. So that's something that has just added to our life, which is a benefit. And, we're just constantly talking about exercise because of the steps that Sean's doing. So I think, that's beneficial. So, just simple everyday things that are making us healthier and, better functioning people. So I think those are positive things.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, I'd love to share with the group how many steps Sean has gotten over the past weekend. Sean,
Yeah.
would you?
Did you have yesterday?
I have
24,000 steps just yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a crazy weekend because I think the night before he had 21,000. So yeah, he's been putting on the steps, those dancing and
23,000.
23,000.
Oh, there you go. So it's important to get it correct. That is absolutely amazing to have that many steps, and it's great to see that the study helps to encourage that as well. So I know we're talking a lot about the positive, and it's always good to see a balanced view. So have there been any challenges, Lisa and Sean, that you see with participating in the study?
Okay, we'll let Sean go first. So is there anything that you don't like about doing the exercise study? Is there anything that's hard or that you don't like?
The squats give me hurt my legs and my knees.
Oh, the squats are hard sometimes.
And fun running too.
Mm.
So that, I would say, for me, really, it hasn't been challenging. I would say, in the beginning, as you guys know, now that you've met me, I am not very technical. And so doing this whole webinar has probably been the biggest challenge. But in the beginning with our Fitbit, it was, getting it connected and it wasn't syncing right. And so it was, oh my gosh, can we do this? Or we had, it was complicated for me. And so I'll have to say that anytime we've had difficulty, I can call somebody, email somebody, text somebody, and everybody has been very helpful. So even though that was challenging, there was support. So, I'm a straight shooter that way. So as long as I say I'm going to do something and I'll do it. And so with somebody saying, yeah, we'll help you. Obviously they helped me and that was a simple thing. So I appreciated that. So the other part, we already have mentioned Boy Jesse, who's our trainer. We have him every other week. We meet with him through Zoom. And so, which obviously we're capable of doing, but, so that maybe would have been challenging for some people, doing the remote, that we're in Omaha and they're Kansas City, but that kind of worked out as a benefit for us, not a challenge because, everybody's busy and for us that fit in our schedule better, more rural followers. And so, Sean would go through the exercises with Jesse and he could show them to him if there was something new that he didn't know how to do. We'd write down, your goal for this week is 12,000 steps or 13,000 steps, whatever it was. And then let's do push-ups this week or squats this week or whatever it would be. We'd write it down. And I guess I'm lucky that Sean is capable, and Sean, would stick to the routine and he would add those in. So I guess that's not really a challenge, but it could have been, but it hasn't been.
Right.
So I feel like it's been very supported. So I appreciate that.
Well, that's also important. If there's no challenges, that's a great thing. And it's great that the research program has the infrastructure in place to be able to reach populations that are outside of the catchment area and in more geographically rural populations. So one last question for the two of you. Okay. Is there anything that you would like the researchers to know or consider when they're planning any future studies or clinical trials?
Okay, if you were going to do, like when this one's done, if we were going to do another study, if we were going to do this again, what would you want to tell them? What would you like about it? What would you want it to be?
I want to be fun and more healthy.
Oh, be more healthy again and be fun.
And be strong.
Something to make you strong.
Mm-hmm. And with your family and friends.
Oh, to do it with your family and friends. That's good. Yep, I agree with that. I think, I think Dr. Lauren hit on it. I mean, I didn't know what her slides were going to be, so I would have probably brought up, it's not just about Sean being in the study. Obviously, I mean, you can see how we communicate. And I mean, that's how Jesse, deals with us too, because sometimes Sean doesn't understand his question exactly. And so, I break it down for him. So, I mean, we're a team, and that's how Sean, gets through life, is me. So the study has to work for both of us. And, I think one of her slides exactly said that. So it's not just him committing to the study, it's both of us. So I think as long as the study is, positive and, just like this one, when I read it, it made sense to me, so, and I mean, I guess I'm assuming most clinical trials and research are supposed to work out that way. So I think I told you guys before, I feel guilty that maybe I haven't been in one before, we haven't been in one before, but we're just at a time in our life that, this is working for us. Sean's out of school, he has his first job, and so we're more open to, being able to participate more. So I feel like as long as studies are, the commitment is there to work with us, which obviously, like I said, we feel supported in this study, so we're having a good experience. I feel like as long as people get that and have that feeling, you're going to be able to find people to be in trials and research and study. So again, that win-win combination.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that raises a great point, and I'll actually open and welcome Dr. Tomey as well to the discussion, because I think this touches on something that pertains to both of you. The point that you raised about participating in clinical trials and clinical studies now, because Sean's at a point where he's out of school and has a little bit more freedom. Do you feel that the commitment for time to participate in studies may have been and I'm doing air quotes here, a deterrent or a reason as to why you may not have participated earlier?
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry if I open it.
I know. I'm like, blah. I don't know if there really was a trial that was presented to me before, and maybe that's because of him having Down syndrome. Do you think, Doctor? I mean, were they out there?
There are some, there's been a lot more trials coming out recently, especially with the National Institutes of Health and Include Initiative. And I think you guys are also in a unique position that, you live in an area without a huge academic medical center who's conducting these trials. And for this one, since we decided it was remote and we could reach out to kind of our surrounding areas, you were able to enroll and find out more about that. But I'm hoping, in the future, you'll have more access to these trials or know about them. And I think that's one really nice thing that like the DS Connect site is doing, where you can go on there and see different trials that might be out there, because there's some that might be in your area. There's some that can be done remotely. You can join the registry, which is a small little part of research, but all that data ends up getting shared with big data sharing hubs, and other researchers can use it to answer some really big questions. So yeah, there probably weren't a ton of studies out there, especially kind of where you all live, but hopefully that's changing now. And you'll still, like I said, we're going to keep bugging you guys now.
Right. Yes, I remember that. I think just like the other day when we were talking about how my friend, so we've lived here 20 years and I have a best friend from all 20 years, and her son also has Down syndrome, the same age as Sean. And, when we moved here, it was kind of like everybody had the same pediatrician, everybody had the same eye doctor. And now that our sons and, kind of our friend group has grown up and our children are older, we branched out because everybody can take their son or their daughter and just go to their same general doctor, that he can come to my same doctor. We don't have a specialized pediatrician or the specialized eye doctor anymore that we all seem to go to when our children were little. So I feel like we're a little bit more branched out, and maybe we're just a little more dispersed in our information. I don't know. I think that's what I was trying to get across the other day. I just feel like we're a little bit more spread out, which seems confusing because now with all the social media, we should just be more connected, but seems like we're not for some reason. So I don't know what that is, but I guess with this research and I don't know, maybe we can, get something going. And maybe now that I'm just new to the transition, maybe there's something out here that I don't know about yet. And I'll just like this, I didn't know that I was missing all these clinical trials, and now I'm in. So
you're definitely in now.
Yeah, I'm in, but it's just kind of and that's, we've lived our life that way. I knew there were things coming down the road, but there was only so much I could know for Sean's life, or any of my kids' life, but mainly for Sean, there was only so much I could know. And so it was like, I would learn as he got older, and so I guess that's part of this. So that's where we're at.
Well, no, and I think you touch on a very important point there, and that's how we handle communication in terms of dissemination to different age populations. Like you said before, when you were younger, the pediatrician was specialized in providing care. But now that, Sean's older and, it's perhaps a bit more spread out in terms of accessing the information. So perhaps we can improving types of communication and dissemination so that it reaches all populations, regardless of age and geographic location, may be beneficial. And I think, as Dr. Tomey mentioned as well, DS Connect is a great starting point, but we can also make available to you, and you can share with your friends, resources that will be available.
And Erica, if you don't mind, I actually have a question for Lauren, because I think this touches on it. Remote evaluation, having people not have to come into your clinic. How has that really, I think that's been a game changer. Can you talk about how that's, really allowed you to get research to more individuals by being able to have these, remote sessions using Zoom, things like that?
Yeah, and I always joke, we used remote before remote was cool. But we started a long time ago, because that's one big thing when working in the Down syndrome world. We realized transportation is an issue. Having, especially in physical activity, having trainers specialized that understand how to work with populations who might have some gait instability or low muscle tone. They didn't know what they were doing. And then you have the social stigma and social support. And so when we started doing these group remote exercise sessions. It allowed more people to, be in them. It took away barriers. It allowed social support. It was really fun. And the study we talked about, actually, it started in January 2020. And so it was before COVID, but as soon as that hit, we were able to continue going just as planned. And everyone really appreciated it then because they got the social support that they were lacking. And then the one other thing that changed is originally we had to have everyone coming into our lab every 6 months for these tests. And, we had to kind of modify or pivot at that point because not everyone could come in and there were concerns or, what do we do about someone who doesn't want to get in an MRI and worrying about COVID. And so we were able to figure out, okay, what our main outcomes, like the ones we care about the most, we don't have to have someone in the lab for. So we could offer kind of remote testing as well. And it really did. It allowed, someone like Sean, who lives 2.5 hours away from us, to be able to join the study. And we've had people from Western Kansas, we've had people from Southern Missouri and Arkansas join the study, and be able to get this intervention that otherwise they wouldn't have. And I think, that's going to be really important as we continue to do research, is how do we access everyone? How do we make sure everyone has, the same availability to join these really nice research studies and get the most state-of-the-art treatment and be included?
I think that's a great point because, and with that reach, I'm sure you're able to reach a more diverse study population as well that may historically been underrepresented geographically or otherwise. I guess I have a question. I'll piggyback off of Lori's question to Dr. Tomey. Dr. Tomey, the same question I presented with Lisa and Sean, if there's any feedback that you could provide to researchers about clinical trials, what exactly would you like them to know?
I think the biggest thing when doing a clinical trial, especially for individuals with Down syndrome, is making sure it's a clinical trial for individuals with Down syndrome. You have to look at that person. What are their unique needs? What will they enjoy? What makes it something worthwhile to do? And, that's one thing we've spent a long time doing, is figuring out what's going to be best for this person and make sure it's going to be safe for this person. And I think that helps a lot in coming up with a successful intervention. Really also looking at what do we need of the caregiver and making sure that's clear, because you have to consider them both, just as Lisa was saying, that it's normally a team. And kind of setting out expectations ahead of time. And I think the biggest thing for other researchers and other people is in terms of like recruitment and how you get in. And, one thing we've been really cognizant about is like making those community partnerships and really working as a team. And it's not just about, okay, we need to recruit people from our study, but what can we give back to the community? What can we be doing on our part? And I think that makes a big difference too. And so we have a great group here called Down Syndrome Innovations in Kansas City that serves individuals with Down syndrome, and they're wonderful. And, we've been really partnering up too to try to provide them services, and they've been helping in research studies. And I think, some of those key partnerships you have to have, and you always have to remember it's not just what can I give, but what can I give?
No, I think that's an excellent point, and something I think can oftentimes be forgotten. So, Lori, I didn't know if you...
No, I agree completely. And I'm just looking at our time and make sure that maybe we'd like to give Lisa and Sean sort of the last, words, what you would like to let folks know.
Got anything want to say?
I love my family.
Oh, he loves his family.
And do you want to give a shout out, Sean, to your brother?
And his mom?
My best friend.
And his best friend. His best friend almost got in the study, but they got too busy. But I think, like Dr. Lauren was saying, the remote, I think, is awesome. I think you guys could really, I think that's key. I think it worked well for us. I keep saying I appreciate so much the support. even they have people coming here to do like Sean's 3-month and 6-month check-ins. Like we are not even having to drive to Kansas City, which in the beginning, I thought that's what we were going to be doing. So even that part has, been even more helpful to us. So, I mean, I can't say enough how great this first study for us has been. So, I mean, if anybody is questioning, like if this is what you're watching to decide if you're going to participate in one, give it a try. I mean, that's what I would say. And I didn't even know you could get out once you got in. So, I mean, why wouldn't you try? So there you go.
And Erica, I think we have one question in the chat that Lauren maybe typed an answer to, but maybe a quick one. Dr. Tomei, what advice would you give to families who are considering participating in clinical trials with their loved one who has Down syndrome, especially families who do not speak English?
Yeah, so I was just working on typing an answer for this, but I would be happy to do it out loud instead because I think it's quicker than typing. I think what you were saying, I'm going to get to the heart of the matter of, families who don't speak English. And there's a couple different things going on. So a lot of groups will have translators available to help translate the materials, or they'll already have some materials done in Spanish. I know a lot of, at least in the field I work with like aging, a lot of materials have been adapted already in Spanish and are available, which helps. Our group, our health coaches, most of them don't speak Spanish. And so when we've had individuals who are only Spanish speaking, or at least, the caregiver is, or the loved one is, we'll ask them like, do you have a friend that can help translate, or another family member who can help translate? And most of the time we've been able to find someone. So we always still include them. We just have to have a way to try to bridge kind of that language barrier. But most people are trying to do that and make it feasible because we want to include everybody. But I would say too, just like, don't be afraid of reaching out. Don't be afraid to find out, what services would be available if you join the study. Would they be able to translate materials with you? Will they have someone who's familiar with your culture? And what can be done? Because a lot of times those accommodations can be made. So, don't be afraid to reach out, ask questions, and see what you can do.
I think that's an excellent point, and thank you, Dr. Tomei. So we want to thank all of our participants for joining. Lisa, Sean, thank you so very much. We appreciate it. Lauren, thank you for your time. And on behalf of the Include Project here at NIH, and I'll turn over to Dr. Lori Ryan to say the last few words, but we want to thank you for your participation in today's webinar. So Lori.
Yeah, I will just echo everything Erica said. Sean, Lisa, thank you so much for participating. It was wonderful to hear what it's been like for you. And Lauren, you really did break down what it's like to participate in clinical trials, give a great overview. So we can't thank you enough. This will be available, on video archives, so people can go back and take a look at it. But thank you so much for all your time. This has been really a wonderful webinar.
A great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.